welcome to a special episode of the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast. This is Justin.
And this is Joey.
And tonight we are going to be talking about one of our favorite filmmakers, Quentin Tarantino, because his new film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is out in theaters. And me and Joey both saw it and figured we would talk about our full thoughts on the films, spoiler-rich and all. So if you haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, definitely recommend checking that out. But to warm up, we're going to go through our favorite Tarantino films. He has, well, technically he has 10 of them, but I guess he has 9 since he considers Kill Bill one film.
Yes. Yeah, he has 10, but like you said, he considers Kill Bill to be one movie. So
yeah, I find it pretty bizarre that he's like, oh, after 10, I'm done. I think he said he wants to write books or something afterwards, but yeah, it's interesting. I saw a news article about a month ago, and it's just like, oh, anticipation mounts again for the fact that Tarantino won't be making films after the next one, and I don't know. I kind of already knew that for a while, but I don't know. Okay, so diving into this ranked list, Joey, what is your number 9 Tarantino movie?
The Hateful Eight.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, I saw it in theaters, of course. I own it. I own all of his movies, but and while I did enjoy it, it's just my least favorite. I found it very long, and there were some things I felt could be cleaned up, and it was before this movie, it was his last movie, and it was just kind of indulgent. I think to keep it short about it, it was kind of indulgent.
Okay. My number 9 would be Jackie Brown. I remember seeing this early on, and I think I might have saw it right after Pulp Fiction, and I guess I was really just kind of anticipating more of that same real hilarious dialogue. And while it has a lot of good moments and some fun characters and some great music, and the story is really good too. I mean, by all means, he has no bad films, but for some reason the story in this one didn't really catch me as hard as some of his other stuff. So while it's a great film, I would say it's my least favorite of his bunch. All right,
fair enough. 8. Death Proof. So again, I enjoyed it. It's just to be fair, this is a movie that was made to be bad. Obviously, is made to be in the grindhouse style. But when it's what, like 30 or 40 minutes is a giant car chase. And it's made to be kind of schlocky. Kurt Russell does great because, well, I mean, he's Kurt frickin' Russell. It falls in that lower end for me. I think also going into the theater and watching it after the zombie movie didn't do it any favors initially either, and just the subsequent rewatches, it's fine, it's great, I enjoyed it, it just hasn't risen any as well.
All right. And so in terms of this list, are we keeping Kill Bill 1 and 2 separate or together?
I have them together on mine, but
okay.
That's however you want to do it is fine with me.
Okay, I'll keep them separate, and so my next one would be Kill Bill Volume 2. I really like the other Kill Bill movie, the original. I've seen it many, many times, as you'll see in my list. But Volume 2 is a little bit lower down. I think it had some interesting Western vibes to it. It kind of wrapped up a little conveniently, but I've only seen it the one time in the theater, and I almost had more fun watching the highlights of Part 1 again in the end credits than I did all of Part 2. Definitely need to revisit it. It's what David Carradine plays Bill.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, definitely need to get back and maybe watch the whole bloody affair at some point. But yeah, Kill Bill Volume 2 towards the end of my list.
All right, so we'll move on. So this is number number 8 or number 7?
It'll be my 7, your 8, or I'm getting lost.
Mm, Well, it's my 7 and your 8, I guess, if we're
Right,
whatever.
I'm
Yeah,
since I'm going with 10 films, that's right.
yeah. All right. So this would be actually the main feature of the evening. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Um, so I won't go into it too much here. It was a very enjoyable film. I actually did enjoy it quite a lot. It's just happened to where it kind of fell, and having only seen it one time, just just didn't have enough to kind of maybe creep up over some of the other ones that I've loved for several years now.
Same here. My next one is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I would reiterate your indulgent comment earlier. I think this is a very, very indulgent film. Has some great stuff to it, like every Tarantino film does, but it didn't quite give me the punch that I really like from a Tarantino movie, especially from my all-time bangers coming up. So, all right, what's your next one?
Next one is Jackie Brown. This is one that I see a lot of people actually usually have near the bottom, like you did, and obviously it's still in the bottom half for me. But it's one that I really enjoyed. It has a bang up cast. I mean, De Niro was huge, Keaton was huge. This was around the he had not been Batman for a little while, but I mean he was still Batman. Sam Jackson was big at that point, so it had a lot of good cast. It was a lot of twists and turns, kind of caper. Um, but it definitely we know the movies that he has in his repertoire. It doesn't hold up to some of those, but I still really enjoyed it.
Very cool. My next one is Reservoir Dogs. I actually came to this film. It was interesting because I knew a lot about Pulp Fiction, but I guess in my early college years, like I knew of Quentin Tarantino as a director, but for some reason I didn't have that drive to like go and see all of his stuff. And I met a guy named Nick Michael in college who's just like, well, you have to see Reservoir Dogs. I mean, that's his first film. And I checked it out, and I mean, it's iconic. You got Mr. Pink, Mr. White, Mr. Brown, you got all that. You have Steve Buscemi talking about the world's smallest violin playing for the waitresses. I mean, so many iconic lines. I remember the last time I watched it. I mean, it's obviously one of his shorter films, and it's tight, but maybe it's the end that when I watched it last time that I kind of remember ending abruptly. Again, it's one of these ones I need to revisit so I can really dig in and do an analysis since I haven't watched it in my Letterbox era. But yeah, that's where Reservoir Dogs falls currently on my list.
Next for me is Reservoir Dogs. I came home and watched it the same day that I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it had been quite some time since I had watched it. I don't actually think I'd watched it on my Blu-ray, so it actually looked fantastic. It was tight. You could definitely see his flair for dialogue already in his first outing. Um, the ending was kind of crazy. With the big shootout, Steve Buscemi leaves. He's got the diamonds. He's the last one standing. The big twist and turn. The big reveal for Tim Roth to the wolf. I can't think of his name. He was the wolf in Pulp Fiction.
Oh,
Harvey Keitel.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you got the big shootout. It was really good. I actually was thinking this one was going to be a little bit higher after the rewatch, but I started listing them out, and it's just kind of where it fell. But I mean, it's a great flick, and it's like you said, it's kind of 90s. It's like a 90s icon movie. So
Absolutely. My next one would be Death Proof. Yeah, this film gets a lot of hate, and I don't really get it. I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't actually see this as part of the Grindhouse feature in the theaters. I saw it later on DVD, and I had a fantastic time with it. Like, it really throws you with that first half being all about, Kurt Russell, in this car killing people, and then it totally switches up and it follows these girls, and I was so into their dialogue, and then that car chase at the end is just an absolute blast. I remember watching it and thinking, I've seen Kill Bill a number of times with my aunt, and she's really into these like women kick butt kind of movies, and I showed her the end of or I mean, I watched all of Death Proof with her, and she got so excited and basically leaped for joy in the very last scene of this movie. It was such a blast to watch that with her, and I have a great time with this movie. I love whenever it's like in black and white, and then all of a sudden they snap and it goes to color. I love those little stylistic things. Probably need to watch it again to do an analysis of it, but Death Proof, a lot of fun and highly, highly underrated.
All right, so we're gonna move on. My next one. Neither one of us have mentioned this one yet, so I feel like we're gonna both have this one kind of high. Is Django. Um, so I remember when this one was first announced, they announced Jamie Foxx as the titular character, and I was pretty pissed. I didn't think that Jamie Foxx was going to do a good enough job. I mean, I know he'd come off of being in Ray and some other things, but still was just not a big fan. And I think he did a good enough job. But I mean, everyone who's seen this or heard about it, knows that this was the Christoph Waltz show, knows that this was the Leo show. Knows that he cut his hand, but being Leo and kept going, basically like, give me my Oscar, and it was Christoph who got his Oscar instead. Um, one of two that he got working with Quentin. So, movies, kind of a crazy out there western. But it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of good, big, guest stars. Jonah Hill shows up, Don Johnson shows up. Just Quentin out there hamming it up with an Aussie accent.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. So definitely one of my favorites.
Next on my list would be The Hateful Eight. I've only seen this the one time in the movie theater, and it was I had a great time with it. I'm a big fan of snow, so I was really into seeing a western in a more snowy climate, and I've always dug the fact that the Morricone music is in it that wasn't used from The Thing. So that's a cool element, and that I remember some really great shots throughout, especially in that snowy setting. I just love the opening carriage ride where Kurt Russell is just like taking like no shit from the girl he's transporting. I remember now the thing about a Quentin Tarantino movie is time and time I've gone to a couple of them, and you'll be sitting there in the movie theater, and then you'll just have someone next to you that is just like totally aghast by this outrageous violence that he has in his movies. And I remember watching Hateful Eight, and there was this lady sitting in front of me, and she was just totally bewildered when was it Jennifer Jason Leigh gets basically the shit smacked out of her, which obviously I don't condone violence towards women, but the way Tarantino does his movies, that's what you come to expect, and while it's revolting, it's also hilarious somehow, which makes him a really special filmmaker. I remember the tension being fantastic in it. I think we had talked about this a few days ago, and you had talked about some of the indulgence of it being slow. I don't recall it being overly so slow, but I do remember like there's like a part where they kind of really hammer in Sam Jackson doing kind of a vulgar act to somebody, which I remember being pretty out there. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back to this one, especially since it's on Netflix and an extended, I think 4 episode structure extended. So looking forward to checking that out. Hateful Eight.
All right, so moving on. This is next on my list. So this will be in my number 3 slot. And this is to most people Quentin's magnus opus, and another '90s classic. This is Pulp Fiction. So I mean, I think everyone knows about Pulp Fiction. It's one of the most quotable movies. Some big quotes. Most of them are pretty vulgar. But it is what it is. It showed a lot of things in ways that hadn't been shown before. Intravenous drug use really hadn't been shown before. Showing the adrenaline shot. All sorts of stuff. And bringing talking about like McDonald's and Burger King and the things in Europe. Just at the time it was really different. made John Travolta a big star again. You know, his star power hadn't been the same since like the 70s. And it did a lot. It did a lot for his career. It did a lot for those people's career. It made Uma Thurman. Um, and then, you know, I mean, Bruce Willis was big, and then the scene with Ving Rhames at the end. You know, was that was a scene for, you know, for 1994. So it just did a lot, and I mean, it's a movie that stands the test of time. It's fantastic. It's iconic, and I mean, I don't know if there's really anything too bad to say about it.
Hmm. Great points. My next up would be Django. This was one I did get the pleasure of seeing in a movie theater, but I had a very interesting movie theater experience. With Jamie Foxx being the lead, a lot of it was an interesting makeup of the crowd. It was like kind of like half Tarantino fans, half like Jamie Foxx fans. So there's quite a few black folks in the audience, which is interesting with the Tarantino film, especially with the strong use of the N-word. And there was a lot of older folks in the movie theater that got quite irritated and like kind of were walking out and stuff. So it was interesting seeing this movie in that dynamic. But regardless, Christoph Waltz, magical in the film. Jamie Foxx is such a badass. I was watching CNN's The Movies documentary, and they had a whole section on Tarantino in the 2000s, and it ended off with that smile Fox gives after in the fiery climax to the show. Such great tension that builds up as, you know, that they get to this point at Candy's house, and, you know, Sam Jackson sees what's going on, but Leonardo DiCaprio's character is kind of thinking other stuff. And then, geez, the Ku Klux Klan scene where they're making fun of that, just, it's hilarious. I mean, his ability to make you laugh at some of the most like crazy and vulgar and you know, just out there stuff is just, it has a charm to it. Great action in this one, that shoot up in the house. Yeah, Django Unchained, another one I need to revisit. I need to see all these all over again and write all my thoughts down.
Yeah, I feel the same way mostly. All right, so this would be my number two. I don't feel like this is going to be a surprise for anybody who's listening to any of our podcasts. There's really only two left, and anybody who listens knows probably what our number one's going to be. But this one's going to be Inglourious Bastards. So Aldo Rain. Man, that's Brad Pitt put in a performance. Christoph Waltz put in a performance. Diane Kruger, Michael Fassbender, like just the cast, like everybody, and the thing, like, you know, this is a German 3, this is a British 3, like that man, just so you know, the Bear Jew from Eli Roth, like just I want my Nazi scalps. Just there's so much stuff, and you know, you had the big, you know, the non-real ending, of course, you know, just blowing Hitler away in the theater and Shoshana burning down the theater at the end. It was just this crazy movie. I mean, it was a great movie. I love it. Like, and I really flip-flopped when I was making this list between putting it in pulp. Like, and honestly, they're really interchangeable. Like, I really could just kind of tie them. Like, if I was just, yeah, just they're both fantastic, and just, yeah, that's, I don't really have anything bad to say about Bastards. I mean, it was fantastic. You know, it was Brad Pitt being, you know, part Native American killing Nazis. That's gonna be strange, and then it comes on, and it works, and it just works. And Christoph Waltz is the bad guy, and he's just so fantastic. You know, he won an Oscar in that movie. I think actually where he won his first Oscar. I think I said it for Django earlier, but I think Bastards is a little older, and he actually won that one first. And it's like, oh my god. So
Yep, you sure did. My next would be Kill Bill. You actually introduced me to this movie, and I remember the first time I watched it, I enjoyed it. I remember you really getting into some of the humor, like the pussy wagon, and I thought that was pretty entertaining. And overall, I thought it was okay. But then it wasn't until I saw like the highlights of it after Kill Bill Volume 2 on the big screen, where that was it the Crazy 88.
yes, the Crazy 88.
That scene was just went up a whole nother level, like, because we were watching it on like this small dorm room TV, and it really didn't do it justice. And since then, I've seen it many times on Blu-ray, twice with my aunt who adores the film, and the crazy violence. Geez, all the stuff you could say about, like, I love the Flight of the Bumblebee song whenever she's going to, I think it's Tokyo. That's incredible. And then you have the I forget what the name of the song is, but Colin Cowherd used to use it on his ESPN radio show, and that is just really, gets you in the mood for a fight, and that's exactly what it primes you up for. Another one I really need to check out again. Oh, and the whistle, the man, there was a whole summer where I was like constantly whistling it. It was just totally stuck in my head. I was driving my poor dad nuts with my whistle. I think that tune's called Twisted Nerve. So much great music in Tarantino films, and Kill Bill really brings it up to a whole nother level. So that's my number 3.
All right, so this is going to be my 2 and 1,
Okay.
as this is what we talked about earlier. So it is going to be Kill Bill 1 and 2. Um, I absolutely love Kill Bill. Anybody who has met me for any amount of time knows that I absolutely love these movies. So we talked about watching this in college on TV. I remember going to see Kill Bill at Christmas break at college. So I don't know exactly how we watched it on that TV, but I will. Sure, I believe you. I don't remember that, but I definitely remember watching Kill Bill um with Troy. I have my story with that is a bunch of people got up and left after one of the fight scenes, and we had the whole theater to ourselves. It was pretty interesting, but I think I remember watching the movie and just being blown away that I'd never really seen anything quite like it. I mean, I grew up watching a bunch of action movies, a bunch of like Van Damme's, watching like Lionheart and Kickboxer and stuff like that, and liking those, and those are martial art movies and stuff, but it was never anything like that. And I love movies and TV shows, where girls are kicking a lot of ass. I like, Buffy, is one of my favorite shows, and, things of that nature. But this was at a whole nother level. And, you combine in, Tarantino's dialogue, you combine in his music, and it's on a whole different level. And then, so you got the first half, Kill Bill 1, and it's just this crazy, violent movie. And yeah, when I was in high school or I guess college rather, and younger, stuff. Okay, yeah, the pussy wagon, haha, the pussy wagon. But she totally just, destroys. I'm Buck, I'm here to fuck, and just destroys him, and then sees the keychain where it says pussy wagon, and just gives him the extra shot, for being a douche, and then you see the background, where she wiggles her toe, goes through that whole thing, and you get the animated scene for O-Ren, and you see O-Ren's background, and that whole scene, was really dope, and so you learn all about O-Ren, and then you flash forward, and you get that scene where O-Ren has won the seat, and like that whole speech, and just again more just super quotable stuff, and then you get where they told the studio was like, we're gonna make it 2 movies, and you get the big cliffhanger. Oh, her kid's still alive. And I just remember leaving the theater like holy shit, I didn't see that coming, and I was just flabbergasted. And then so I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting for Volume 2. Volume 2 comes, and while less fighting, more story. But finally someone gets the drop on her, and it wasn't even Daryl Hannah. It wasn't even the other big bad ninja chick. is blood and just shoots her. And then she has to get out of the grave. Like, there was just so much other cool stuff, and just as a whole movie. And then, she finally gets there. And while I was a little sad that, her and Bill don't actually have this big, knockdown, drag out fight, she shows him up because the one thing that Pai Mei never taught Bill, her, a Caucasian woman that he despised, she was taught. And it's just this, like, just big moment. And it was just so good. And that's, like I said, anybody who followed me on Letterboxd until the other day, that was my picture. It's my favorite movie on Letterboxd. It's just listed as my favorite movie. So, Kill Bill.
All right, so my number 2 would be Pulp Fiction. This was my first Tarantino movie. I have a fond memory of growing up, and I remember sitting at the table at my grandmother's house, and my uncle, who was one of my kind of inspirations for the kind of movies I liked, he's just like, guys, have you seen Fargo and Pulp Fiction? And it always stuck in my mind. It wasn't until years later that I finally watched it, and I don't even remember the first time I watched it. I've seen it so many times. Just the out of orderness of the story, if that's even a term, non-linear storytelling, I guess you would say, just blows me away how it's told out of order, but yet comes together so perfectly. I remember one of my good friends growing up, him and his dad were, I think his dad mostly was a big Tarantino fan, and they would talk about, the fourth film from Tarantino's coming out or whatever, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept, really emphasizing how many films a director has. So many great moments. It's like you'd said earlier, it's so quotable. Royale with cheese, I give a killer foot massage. He got the introduction of Mr. Tarantino's little fetish there. Bruce Willis, such incredible performances. And then, you have this... what would you say your least favorite segment of Pulp Fiction is, Joey?
My least favorite segment?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever been asked that before.
Okay. Well, just to tee it up a little bit better, I say, I love the Vincent Vega going out with Uma Thurman scene, but to me, it's the slowest part of the film, although it's awesome. I mean, you have her drawing the square or whatever Daddy-O thing. That's a great little stylistic bit that comes out of nowhere. And I didn't even know there's a lot of references in there, especially from Tarantino's love of early Hollywood, that I was actually, I think the last time I watched it, I was Googling some of the references there. So that's my least favorite, but I mean, and I think my most favorite has to be whenever the hitmen actually go inside the room and they have the big ordeal with, actually that's what divided into 2 parts between them blowing him away and then them getting the mess cleaned up. And then it just ends on this just real chill moment. And, the line of, which wallet is it? It's the one that says bad motherfucker. I mean, there's just so many hilarious lines in there, and some of them make you cringe a little bit, but they're still hilarious. And man, Pulp Fiction it's just a force of nature, and it's one of my 4 favorite films of all time. But for some reason, it's not my favorite Tarantino movie. And you're out, so I guess it's back to me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Inglourious Bastards. So I saw this on my birthday. It was the first time I had seen a Tarantino movie on opening night, I believe. I might have seen Kill Bill Volume 2 on opening night or somewhere close to opening. But I just remember being in a packed theater of Tarantino fans, and you could not, it was just such a respectful audience. There was so much great tension in that theater and laughs when you would expect it to, and you could just really tell it was almost like a convention of people coming together that just really love this guy's movies. And I just remember that all the tension that's built up in that Mexican standoff piece that you were talking about earlier with the whole mistake with the the Three Fingers. And I actually recently watched it a few months ago, and I was just amazed how, like, the first time I watched it, like, it really felt like slow building tension, but it flies by now whenever I watch it. And I could go on and on about the movie. I mean, Christoph Waltz, such an amazing performance, and Brad Pitt's even better. We're in the Nazi killing business, and boy, business is a booming. And that end, I mean, that's part of the reason I think it goes to the top of my list, is hearing that theme start driving up, hearing Christoph Waltz's character screaming at the top of his lungs as Brad Pitt carves that swastika on his head, on his forehead, and says, "I think this is my masterpiece," and it goes to black, is one of my favorite conclusions to a movie ever. It's just perfect. I was pulling so hard for it to get the Oscar. Unfortunately, Mr. Tarantino's work is not really appreciated in that realm as much. It was nominated, at least. I think The Hurt Locker won that year, and the Facebook movie from Fincher probably should have won that year. But man, Inglourious Bastards. Check out my Letterboxd review to see all my favorite moments. Really, me diving into them. But for the sake of brevity, I think it's his masterpiece.
I mean, we're gonna talk about the one being robbed. I mean, we're gonna talk about Pulp Fiction. That was, I mean, there was some hitters that year. We were just kind of looking through. I mean, it lost to Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump, but I mean, like, I've watched that kind of recently, and like, yeah, it's a nostalgia trip and everything, but like I really feel like Pulp Fiction probably should have taken that over that. And I know that's probably kind of a controversial statement, and people are probably going to be like, "Oh, you're a Quentin fanboy," and yeah, I am kind of a Quentin fanboy. That's not even a controversial statement to say I'm a Quentin fanboy, but like just generally, like, film to film, I feel like if that was the year he was going to get it, that was the year he probably was. And that, and Inglourious is really good. Like, I even put it higher, and that was probably his next year that he was probably going to get it. And I don't, unless something changes, I don't foresee it anymore now, with the way that the movies with movies that are, so many movies that are made at the attempt of this movie is made to win an Oscar.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, Shawshank, Pulp Fiction, and Forrest Gump all going head to head, and at least he got the original screenplay, which is, usually when the Oscars like reward somebody that has some real innovation that comes to the table. You think like Jordan Peele with Get Out, or like Spike Lee with Black Klansman last year. Like, the edgier, like, more hip films, if they're going to get rewarded, it's in that original screenplay category. And unfortunately, Pulp Fiction fell victim to that cross to bear. But yeah, carrying on from the Oscar conversation, I remember when I heard Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming out, and I was like, maybe this is going to be the film that'll be like Quentin Tarantino's, like, go all the way through the Oscars and really solidify his place in history, in that form of history. And I'd be very surprised if it happens. But all right, so let's dive into our feature of the night. The reason that's brought us together is the fact that we've both seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood now. And so this movie is it's a long one. I think it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it's about this burnt out Hollywood TV actor who starred in a Western, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And the movie set up kind of showing him in these TV episodes, which that's definitely one of the solid parts, interesting parts stylistically of the movie, is it flashing back to like the look of an old presentation. And he's confronted by Al Pacino's character. And he's just like, you realize that, you're not looked at as the leading man anymore. You just keep getting cast in all these other people's shows, and you get knocked off because you're the heavy. And he has this relationship with Brad Pitt's character, who is his stuntman. So they have a great chemistry together, and it's really this like it brings me back to the fact that Tarantino said that Dazed and Confused was one of his favorite hangout movies of all time, and I think this might have been his own attempt at making a hangout movie, because you're hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, and they're really interesting characters to follow, and you're with them so long. And when I was watching this, like, I was enjoying it a whole lot, but it's like, man, this is moving forward at a really, really slow pace. And while there was funny moments, it's really not like, because I mean, you can probably time it in Pulp Fiction. There's like a pretty funny punchline within like a line of dialogue pretty regularly, and it was far and few between here, and definitely not as much like outrageous violence. But you do get that at the end, thankfully. And the way I described it in my Letterboxd review is, if you're going to watch anybody like stack dominoes, it's going to be Quentin Tarantino, because by the time he finishes putting that last domino in place and knocking them all down, it's going to be pretty spectacular. So it's a treat to see him build something like this, and it's definitely unique and more I would say, not sympathetic. What would be the word? While I'm thinking about that, you want to jump in, Joey, with some of your thoughts on the plot of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I mean, I enjoyed the plot. I thought it was, it was very enjoyable to watch. I really liked the chemistry between Brad Pitt and Leo. I thought they had a really good chemistry, and I mean, I kind of assumed they would. I mean, they're two of the heaviest hitters, as far as actors go. So I really didn't have any surprise there. Everything they were asked to do, they did well. I really thought Brad kind of stole the movie. To be honest, I mean, every scene with him was fantastic. Most of my problem was it was kind of slow. Like, I didn't realize it was 2 hours and 45 minutes long. I mean, so I know that's kind of contradictory. Like, I didn't realize it was quite as long as it was, but I thought it was more like 2.5 hours. And I know that doesn't seem like a big difference, but so I mean, honestly, my main thing, which I guess this isn't really, I guess, kind of plot. They could have, like, I felt like Margot Robbie was just, they cast her, they used her very little, and then put her name on the marquee, and it's like, Margot Robbie's in this movie, and she wasn't really there, and it was one of the things, like, if you wanted to make this movie speed up a little bit more, and it was at 2:4, I think it was 2:41. If you get it down, if you got it down to actually 2.5 or 2:10. More in the movie moves a lot brisker, because a lot of her scenes could have been cut out. You could barely put her in the movie, probably cast someone else, but whatever. And he speeds the movie up, and the movie probably runs at a much brisker pace than goes for better experience.
And the word I was searching for just a few minutes ago was sentimental, which really kind of ties back into the name of the movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which really hit me once you finally do see how it plays out. And I do remember how, like, when we first started hearing about this movie, we heard that Quentin wanted to tackle the Manson murders in a movie, and then you're like, oh well, but then you kind of hear that, oh, it's just kind of a part of it. It's it's really about this other guy, and spoilers ahead. I mean, to see him do this revisionist history element, just like he did with Inglourious Bastards, with having it to where you really build up to get to know and love these guys, and they're the ones where the murderer or the Manson clan like busting on them and want to rain on their party, and they're like, we're gonna fuck you up, and they royally fuck them up with face smashing, flamethrower torching, just this outrageous violence that we know and love so much from Tarantino movies, and it's okay because they're the Manson murderers. We don't care about them. Let's see them. Let's see them go up in flames. And I was listening to this other guy talk about it, and he was pointing at the fact that two of the murderers are women, and Tarantino and violence against women in films. And I think people like to really, really dig in on. In my eyes, they're just all people. And I mean, there's men that get killed in Tarantino's films, and there's women that get killed in Tarantino films. And I think some people just have an agenda whenever they address things like that.
I mean, yeah, I wasn't even thinking like, oh, they killed two women. I was just like, look, these people, they're people. They busted up in these dudes' house. They busted in with a fucking gun. They picked on the wrong person because they showed us earlier in the movie Brad Pitt fought Bruce Lee and hung with Bruce Lee, and so they picked the wrong person. And then the other person rolled up into the pool. Leo was like, hell no, went and got the flamethrower that we knew he had from when he in a movie fought the Nazis instead of Brad Pitt, who fought the Nazis in another movie, which I thought was kind of a haha kind of moment, that
Oh yeah, that's a good connection.
Quentin likes to do. And then he used a flamethrower, and I was just like, all right, this is ridiculously over the top, but what to expect. So I like that the one that ran away was Emma Hawke, or Emma Thurman Hawke. So that was cool. And basically, she was kind of Robin from any of those who've watched Stranger Things season 3. She was not quite the same character, but it was very similar. And I was just like, yep, she was just nope, gotta go out, deuces. That was kind of cool. So couldn't get Uma, got Uma's kids, keep it all in the family.
And to speak to your point about the Margot Robbie thing, I had heard complaints about her being kind of a shell of a character early on, and I didn't really think about that as I was watching the movie. And to me, so her character Sharon Tate, who in real life was murdered by the Manson clan or whatever, she was the wife of Roman Polanski, and I guess he was out of the country at the time, and like throughout the film, we really see her being just this fun-loving person. Like, yes, she doesn't have like a lot of dialogue, but I think she kind of seems to be. She's kind of made out to be kind of a loner. And the fact that you see her at a party, just kind of doing all these '60s dances, having a great time, and then she's so sweet whenever she asks to be let into her own movie, and you kind of see kind of Tarantino through her whenever like she's sitting there in the movie theater, just loving the heck out of this movie that she happens to star in, and she's enjoying the crowd, enjoying her kick butt in the movie, and you see her darn feet propped up there, and Tarantino's little fetish coming out again. So, yeah, I could definitely see her being more of a fleshed out character, but I think the point was just to show her as this sweet, sentimental person that you're overjoyed at the end whenever she comes out and she's pregnant. She's like, hey, let's all hang out and stuff. And then you have the kind of a lullaby music come up, and it says, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because it's this fairy tale revisionist history where this tragedy that kind of ended. I'm not a historian of Hollywood history by any means, but I kind of get the impression that maybe this murder was kind of an end of an era, and this was a way of Tarantino going back in and saying, well, I'm going to put some badass characters in here who took care of business. You're welcome, Sean.
From my understanding of it, so when the Manson clan broke in, they murdered Sharon Tate, did all that stuff. So sent Roman Polanski off the deep end, which having your wife murdered could do understandably. Well, then you would, which some people know, and then some other people might not know, and I may not get this 100% correct, but then he supposedly like took a teenaged girl and like locked her in a basement and did some sexual things to her, which is why if he's still alive, he's not allowed in the country.
Yeah,
or until he,
he's
yeah,
still making
yeah.
he's still making movies in Europe, but yeah, he's not allowed to come back to the U.S. He's
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it's because if he steps foot in the country, he's, to be arrested on site for that. But it's because basically he went off the deep end because of what happened with Sharon Tate. Because yeah,
Right.
he won an Oscar after that he couldn't accept, or couldn't be there to accept in person. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so as far as the vibe in Hollywood and stuff, I don't know how that affected that, but yeah, you could definitely see how an actress who was probably well beloved or at least well liked. I mean, being married to one of the, as like they said in the movie, he's the biggest director in Hollywood. He's the director of Rosemary's Baby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, um, how that could affect the vibe of everything in Hollywood, especially the end going in from the '60s to the '70s. Kind of winding down the Flower Child era and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So, but to my point of at least for her character, for Margot Robbie's portrayal, so in the movie, she's at the party and they're like, she was with this guy, which was played by Emil Hirsch, and now she's with this guy, which was Roman Polanski. Oh, they look very similar. Ha ha ha. And then they showed her in the car, they showed her at the party. Then she was driving her own car, picked up a hitchhiker, drove her to the movie studio. Then she watched her own movie, and they showed her in the house one time, and it's like all of this stuff. It didn't do much. And they showed her at the end, and they showed her at the Mexican restaurant. Like it just wasn't a lot, and it was like 2 hours and 41 minutes. Like if you were trying to cut this down to to get it down to a more casual, I don't want to say casual, but a quicker pace to keep the movie flowing a little better. Um, I feel like you show her in the car. Hey, that's Roman Polanski. You show her at the party. These are the two she was with, and then you can show her at the end, and that the whole scene in the movie theater, it was really cool. Like I actually enjoyed that scene. Hey, she's watching her own movie, blah blah blah. But it didn't really. It felt like it kind of killed everything. Like as far as the pace, it really didn't do anything. Although had another reason for them to put Bruce Lee in the movie.
Yeah, true. And I really want to see Beyond the Valley of the Dolls a lot more now. Not only is it on Criterion, but like that was one of her movies, so it'll be interesting to see that. I guess I shouldn't delay any more about talking about like my favorite scene in the movie, which has to be whenever Leonardo DiCaprio is acting with this little girl who's from one of me and my wife's favorite TV shows, American Housewife. Her name is Julia Butters, and she plays this little girl named Trudy in there. And it's kind of funny because like he goes and sits down next to her, and he's like an absolute wreck. And like she's just sitting there as confident as can be, and you can kind of see that Tarantino might be taking a jab at character actors because she's just like, I prefer to be known as my character on set because if it gives me this little bit much of an advantage with my performance, then I think it's worth it. And so that's a little bit tongue in cheek. And then it gets really emotional where he like starts reading this book, and she's like, oh, what's that book about? And he starts talking about this like horse rider or something who is not as great as he used to be, and it's really about him, and he like totally gets emotional about it. And so that was a great moment between the two. And they have another one a little bit later on where like at the end of it, it's like, oh man, you did an amazing job there. That's like one of the best performances I've seen. So I love the chemistry those two had, and I kind of like some of the meta elements that went into it. Like there's a few moments where he gets like really frustrated and he wants to cut and redo the scene, and it's really cool to see how the camera like goes back. You can kind of you see the perspective of the camera, and it wheels back around. Was it Timothy Oliphant? And they restart the scene, and you're like, oh, come on, Leo, you can do it. And I mean, we know he's like a tremendous actor, and where he's probably getting it first time every time. But this character, he's a little bit of a mess, and we see him play the scene out completely perfectly, and everybody loves him. And you had that fantastic scene of him in the trailer where he's like, I'm never going to drink another drop. I'm not going to drink another drop. You better not fuck up. And he's like looking at himself in the mirror and having this like Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing going on. And then, to top it off, you get that great Tarantino laugh where he takes the swig right after he said he was not going to do any more drinking. And he goes out and he does a great job. And so I think those character moments with Leonardo DiCaprio's character Rick Dalton were, some of the best parts of the whole film. And I think the last thing I want to say before I throw it back to you is, so we know Tarantino movies to be very title cardish. A lot of times, like they'll like flash forward or backward, and we'll get some kind of title card saying, what's going on. And in this movie, there were a lot of flashbacks that kind of came out of nowhere. Like a lot of times, like you would like be watching it and you would, it'd be very obvious that was a flashback. Like I think there's a point where like they show Rick Dalton as if he were like about to do the scene from The Great Escape. But then there's this scene where Brad Pitt's character Cliff Booth is like fixing like I think it was like an antenna or something on the top of Rick's house, and all of a sudden he kind of looks off to the sky. And they show like the whole scene with him and Bruce Lee, which got him kind of, I guess, punished in terms of not being able to do as much work as a stunt guy. And then all of a sudden it goes back to him on the roof. I'm like, oh, that was a flashback. It kind of took me off guard. And we had talked about this a little bit, the fact that there was like no transition there, but like towards the end of the movie, like we kept seeing these timestamps like constantly, like they went to the Mexican restaurants, it's this time. They walked up the street, it was this time. They got in the pool, it was this time. And like you had mentioned about cutting things out of the movie, and I remembered distinctly there's this really long scene where like Brad Pitt goes on this walk with his pit bull, and it just shows him walk all the way down the street, and then you see the car with the Manson killers coming all the way up the boulevard, and it's just like, okay, get on with it. I mean, I guess this is building tension, but okay, it's a car going on the street. We get it, Tarantino.
Yeah, like that's one where they could have just showed him. Like they just made to make that part shorter. You just show him down the street, them coming up the street. Okay, he's out of the house. Okay, we get it. They passed each other. Cool. So the scene you were talking about, or the couple of scenes with the girl and Leo, those were fantastic. Timothy Olyphant was great. I loved seeing him be a cowboy again. I loved Justified, and he was really great. I was actually kind of sad not to see Walt Goggins back because he was in Hateful Eight and Django, and he does really good as he's done really well in Quentin's movies, and he was really good in Justified, and having him with Timothy was been really good as well. But there was already a ton of people in here, so it's fine. But I really loved the scene. So they build up this tension. So Brad Pitt's character Cliff's been driving Jack around, and you see the hippie girl, and he sees her again, and then he sees her the third time, and he can finally pick her up. So he drives her a little bit, and the scene where they're driving on the interstate kind of ran long. Probably could have cut some of that down too, especially the where she solicits him, and he turns her down because she's too young. But all right, sure, whatever. But they get out, and he takes her where she's going, and it's the old set where they used to shoot the TV show. And she starts introducing him to all the youths that live out there and everything, and then he realizes that the old producer or whatever, the guy who still owns the ranch, is still the one out there, and just that whole scene where he goes in and talks to the guy who's blind and everything is like that whole scene I thought was really good. There's a lot of tension building in that scene, and it kind of felt like they were going to pop everything off right there. And then they kind of save it for later because that's where, Tex comes back, and Tex tries to get to him, and he ends up driving off before Tex can get back on the horse, and it's Tex later who's the one who ends up breaking into the house. So it's a lot of build up. And there was a side note there. So we saw this person's name scroll across the screen. Opening credits was Dakota Fanning. So Dakota Fanning was a big teen, or TV, or sorry, she was a big child star, and you hadn't really seen much of her lately, so we were like looking for her and looking for her. Never found her. She was like the redheaded girl who was like the main one in the house who was like, "Go away, I'll deal with this." Never even recognized her. Um, Missed Rumor Willis. She was one of those kids too that was in there. Missed her in there too. So she's more known for who her I guess her parents are than her acting, unfortunately. But um, so yeah, but that was kind of the big scene I liked, other than the finale, because the finale was like we were talking about earlier. We talked about some of the things to happen, but it was this big build, and like you said, these big domino pieces being set up to where they broke in, and then just Brad Pitt went ape until the flamethrower came out from Leo. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I did recognize Dakota Fanning, and wow, she was looking pretty rough in that role. And it was interesting. I mean, yes, there's a lot of tension built up into that scene, but it's kind of a fake out too, because he's like, Brad Pitt swears he knows Bruce Dern's character, and he's like, "What? Who are you? Get out of here!" And so that's kind of a fun moment. But that does a great job of really setting up, who this cult is, and kind of the vibe with them. And I love the scene whenever he, like one of the guys like decides to like pop his tire, and he really shows what's what, and that shows his kind of tough guy side, which comes up throughout, like with his fight with Bruce Lee and stuff. And I thought it was a little strange, like how he's like tripping balls on this acid cigarette, but then he's able to snap into it and really kick ass all of a sudden. I mean, I went with it. I had fun, but that was a little sudden. But yeah, I mean, it's a Tarantino movie. There's so much great stuff there. It just is not as punchy, and it's just like I kind of pride myself that I do watch a lot of Criterion movies now. I mean, so do you. And I think that I've really built up a tolerance to slower movies. I think a lot of times, like, people say, "Oh, this movie is so slow and boring," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? That was moving along at a really good click." And so I feel like I have a tolerance for slower movies, but I still notice them, and I felt like he definitely took his time with this, with really getting us in the groove of who these two guys were. It was enjoyable hanging out with them, but I was kind of wanting to just get to that climax a little faster. And so that's the reason why it's not quite as strong as some of my other movies from Tarantino. But maybe on repeated viewings, maybe my tune will change a little bit more, when maybe I'll appreciate the fact that he was a little bit, had a more subtle touch on this compared to his usual more out there flamboyant humor and violence.
yeah, I would definitely watch it again, and maybe there would be some stuff I picked up on and missed, or something of that nature. But yeah, definitely having watched a lot more Criterions, and just expanded the kind of movies that I watched in the last couple of years. Definitely having watched some slower movies, but like I said, it was slow. I didn't realize it was 2 hours and 45 minutes slow. I thought I'd been in there, nowhere near that amount of time. But like the second half of the movie definitely picked up, and in that ending, it was just a big explosion. And I guess the spots where there was with the one fight between Brad and Bruce, and where he punched the guy out, and this, the scenes in the movies where there was some, in the movies and TV shows where there was the fighting, and then where he did the Italian, not Italian, but Italian.
My dad
spaghetti
does that
westerns.
too. It drives me crazy.
The spaghetti westerns, and then where
Yeah.
he became the Italian James Bond. There was that kind of stuff, but that part at least was definitely near the end. But it was
Mm-hmm.
it had some good stuff. It just like we discussed earlier, both had it kind of near that 7-8 range, just down near the
Mm-hmm.
bottom for him. So
Yeah.
one. So we talked about Oscars earlier. One of the things is kind of a trope with them is the movies that are about movies, or movies that are about films and TV shows and plays, tend to get a lot of hype in
Mm-hmm.
that part. So I was kind of wondering what you thought about its chance when it comes to that. Outside of its subject matter, I don't foresee it having a real shot. But
I mean, it might touch a sweet spot with some of the Hollywood types, and I mean, now that you look at the Oscars, I mean, generally Oscars play a lot of like catch up, like was it 2 years ago when Guillermo del Toro won for Shape of Water. I think a lot of people might have thought of like that as being like making up for the fact that he didn't win for Pan's Labyrinth, and yeah, there's definitely a factor where Hollywood loves to pat movies on the back about the industry. Like I think the last time we saw that might have been with when Birdman won. So maybe they might appreciate this more subtle touch that Tarantino is giving here. I mean, they probably appreciate it a lot more than what he did with like the over the top stuff with Django. So yeah, I guess we'll see how it plays out. I remember seeing the Golden Globe nominations last year, and like I had seen films like First Reformed and You Were Never Really There, and these really great art house pieces, and then I saw like the nominations, and it was like A Star Is Born and Bohemian Rhapsody and Green Book, and I was like, oh, these are a lot more mainstream than what I was expecting. So yeah, you never know what's hot, what's not. That's kind of the general, how that all plays out. And yeah, I guess just to say one more thing on the film, going back to the whole like Rick Dalton's character going and doing all the like spaghetti westerns and having that like second half of his career going abroad. Like yeah, I've definitely heard Quentin talk about his love for like spaghetti westerns, so you can kind of see that. Well, actually, westerns in general, which I think is so much about what that character is. Tarantino loves that part of entertainment. And but I was just gonna say like this whole movie is such like a slow grind of like him like understanding who he is currently at as an actor, but then like this third act clips in and it's like boom 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 with all these movies he was in all of a sudden in Italy. Like maybe they could have like paced it out a little better to where like some of it was like him figuring out who he was, other maybe more of like him being in Italy and meeting his wife. But I mean, it is what it is, and it's a really good Tarantino film, just not my favorite.
yeah, well, to speak to that part, so the one thing they got me was just like, so okay, so he went over to Italy, so he's accepted his fate of where he is in his career, but then it was like, oh, we have to sell the house because the whole time he was in Italy, he spent almost all the money he earned in this lavish apartment, and
Mm-hmm.
so and then he had to have the scene with Brad Pitt with Cliff, and he was like, oh, I can't afford to keep you around anymore, so I guess I'm not going to be seeing you. We're not going to be able to be friends. And he's like, well, you kind of have it basically like, you don't really have to pay me. We can still be friends, guy. And it's like, um, but it was like he accepted his fate that he had to go over there, but he still didn't accept his fate that he had to, stop, the same kind of baller lifestyle that he was still spending,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went and got an Italian wife at the same time.
And she was a lot of fun at the end of the movie. I kind of wish we would have seen more of her throughout. And I guess he was kind of showing that the fact that even though he had kind of a renaissance in his career with going to do this, he's still somewhat of this flawed kind of faded guy who's going to make a lot of errors. And we see that. I mean, he like you said, he wasted a bunch of money on this apartment he probably didn't need, and then it's hilarious to see him being a drunk at the end, walking around with his he's talking to the cops, and he's just like, I was just sitting here making my margaritas. So
I
great
mean,
acting.
but at the same time, I mean, it's one of these things where your character is your character. He was Jack Dalton was Jack Dalton, so you saw some growth, but he still had his one flaw, which he maintained. It was still him. So you didn't get necessarily everything. Yes, it all ended up tied up in a bow, in the sense that Sharon Tate, especially with her being pregnant, we knew she was pregnant. She wasn't murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of applicable. We saw this big. So in Game of Thrones, you saw this with Jaime Lannister, where he had this one big character flaw, and they put him in a story arc where it looked like he was going to get rid of that character flaw, and he was going to tie that, you just completely go the other way, clean that up, fix that character flaw, and then he fell right back into it, which is very human. That's what a lot of humans do. So in the same way, if you look at it from that sense, that's a very human thing to do, especially from someone, if they're having, especially if they're having self-doubt, especially in the Hollywood industry, where what you show on the outside of what you have is very important. So it also, from that sense, makes a lot of sense as well.
So, what star rating did you give this one?
I haven't actually rated it yet. I was waiting till after we did this, but it'll probably be somewhere, probably in like the 3.5 to 4, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I normally qualify my 4 rating as an excellent film, and this definitely qualifies as an excellent film. Yeah, so 4 for me. Yeah, I think we nailed that one, Joey.
Every once in a while.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening to this special episode of the Average Joe's Movie Club Cast. We'd love to get your feedback. How can they reach us, Joey?
At the Average Joe's Movie Club Cast at gmail.com.
You can listen to us on YouTube and SoundCloud, and
you can reach both of us at our separate Letterboxd accounts. I'm letterboxd.com/Joey_P.
And I'm just look up Justin Peterson on Letterboxd. You'll see the main character, or one of the main characters from Inglourious Basterds, Aldo Rain, and yeah, that's me. All right, everyone. Happy movie watching. Skull.
Good night, everybody.